Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be diving into something I think we can all relate to, getting organized. But our source material goes way beyond just tidying up. We're talking about using organization as a tool to navigate those big life transitions.
That's right, yeah. Like decluttering for the soul, as cheesy as that might sound. The audiobook we're exploring really emphasizes that our physical spaces often reflect our inner state, especially during times of change.
Okay, so right off the bat, the author introduces this idea of life as a series of chapters. It totally resonated with me. Have you ever felt like your surroundings no longer match who you've become, like your stuff is stuck in a previous chapter of your life?
Absolutely. And what's interesting is that the author suggests this mindset shift can actually impact our decisions when we're organizing. It's not just about getting rid of stuff. It's about asking yourself, does this item belong in the chapter I'm creating now?
That's so smart. It's like being the editor of your own life story, choosing which elements to carry forward. But the audiobook doesn't shy away from the emotional side of things either, right?
Not at all. In fact, the author argues that organizing can be incredibly cathartic, especially during transitions. There's a story about a woman who held onto a deceased loved one's belongings for years, feeling completely stuck. It wasn't until she was ready to process her grief that she could finally start organizing those items.
Wow, that's powerful. It really highlights how our belongings can hold so much emotional weight. So it's not just about cleaning, it's about creating space both physically and emotionally to move forward.
Exactly. And this is where the author introduces a framework I found really helpful. The three Ps:
Hmm.
people, process, product. It's all about personalizing your approach to organization.
Instead of just giving us a bunch of generic tips, the audiobook actually encourages us to understand ourselves better, really.
Right. The people part is all about recognizing your own habits and tendencies. Are you someone who thrives on elaborate systems, or do you prefer to keep things simple? Do you get overwhelmed by too many choices, or do you need a designated spot for absolutely everything?
But isn't there a danger in over-personalizing? I could see myself getting lost in the details and creating a system that's actually more complicated than just going with a basic approach.
That's a valid concern.
Mm.
The key is to find a balance between what works for you and what's actually sustainable. And that's where process comes in. It's about the steps you take to organize.
Mm.
Do you prefer to tackle everything at once, or do you work better in smaller chunks? Do you need to visually map out your plan, or are you more of a go-with-the-flow organizer?
I'm definitely a smaller chunks person, but what about the actual tools and containers? I feel like that's where I always get stuck choosing the right product, as the author calls it.
The audiobook has some great tips for that too. But the overarching message is to choose products that support your process, not the other way around. There's an anecdote about a writer whose hyper-organized system worked perfectly until a major life change made it too time-consuming to maintain.
Ouch, I can relate to that. Sometimes I create these elaborate systems and then life throws a curveball and suddenly it all falls apart.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to be flexible and adaptable, and to choose products that can evolve with your needs. But before we get too caught up in the how-to of it all, the author introduces this really cool exercise called Home is Not Home Without.
Ooh, tell me about this. It sounds intriguing.
It is. It's essentially a way to identify the objects that truly make your home feel like you. The author encourages you to go through each room and pinpoint those items that have real meaning, that tell your story, that spark joy, the whole Marie Kondo thing.
I love that. So it's not about clinging to everything you own. It's about curating a space that reflects your values and the life you're building. It's almost like creating a museum of your own personal history.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And what I found fascinating is that the examples in the audiobook aren't always what you'd expect. It's not just about expensive art or family heirlooms. It's about things like a chipped bowl that belonged to your grandmother, or a mismatched set of mugs that remind you of a special trip.
Ah, I love that. Those personal touches make a space feel so much more authentic. But once you've identified those truly special items, what about all the other stuff? The stuff you're not quite sure about keeping.
Well, that's where things get really interesting, because the audiobook provides a framework for making what the author calls no regrets decisions.
Okay, I'm all ears. Decluttering can feel so daunting sometimes, especially when you're dealing with sentimental items. How does the author suggest we approach those often emotionally charged decisions?
The author actually provides a really helpful list of questions to ask yourself as you're deciding what to keep and what to let go.
Ooh, give me the highlights. I'm always looking for better ways to make those tough choices.
Well, some of the questions are pretty practical, like, is this item damaged or broken? Or Do I have duplicates of this?
Hmm.
But then it gets more interesting when the author suggests asking, does this make my house feel more like home? Would I buy this again?
Hmm.
And here's a big one. Am I keeping this out of guilt or obligation?
That last question is so key. It's like sometimes we hold on to things not because they bring us joy, but because we feel like we should. It's almost like having a therapy session with your belongings, trying to unpack those emotional attachments.
I love that analogy. And speaking of emotionally charged items, the audiobook has a really insightful section on dealing with inherited belongings. Those can be particularly tough to let go of.
Totally. How does the author suggest navigating that tricky territory? It feels like there's an added layer of responsibility when you're dealing with family history and memories.
The author's approach is actually quite beautiful. Instead of focusing on the individual objects, they suggest asking yourself, what was the essence of the person who owned this?
Hmm.
What were their values, their passions, their quirks? And then, what items best represent that essence?
That's so much more meaningful than just keeping everything out of a sense of obligation. It's about choosing items that truly honor the person's memory and spirit. But what if you're still left with a mountain of stuff?
Well, the author talks about the power of creating a memory box. It's like a curated collection of special items that can fit in a single container.
Oh, I love that idea. It creates a designated space for those precious memories without letting them take over your entire house. It sounds like a great way to strike a balance between honoring the past and creating space for the present.
Absolutely. And once you've made those tough decisions and cleared some clutter, it's time for the fun part, putting it all back together. And this is where the author's concept of the zebra one comes in.
Zebra one. Okay, you're going to have to explain this one to me.
Basically, the author uses this analogy. Just as every zebra has unique stripes, you have a unique way of thinking and organizing. So it's all about embracing your individuality and creating systems that work for you.
So it's not about trying to fit into some cookie cutter mold of perfect organization.
Not at all. What works for one person might be utter chaos for another. There's no single right way to do things. The audiobook encourages you to experiment with different approaches and to tailor those systems to your personality and lifestyle.
You know what? That's actually really liberating. It takes the pressure off trying to achieve some unattainable standard of organization. It's about finding what feels good and sustainable for you. But how do you even begin to figure out your personal Zebra One style?
That's a great question. The author suggests paying attention to your natural tendencies. Do you gravitate towards visual systems? Do you love labels and containers? Are you a minimalist at heart or a collector of beautiful things? Once you start to recognize those patterns, you can start to build systems that support those tendencies.
I love that. So it's about self-discovery as much as it is about organization. But the audiobook also provides some practical tips, right? I mean, at some point, we actually have to do the organizing.
Oh, absolutely. The author offers lots of great advice on things like maximizing space, using containers effectively, and creating systems that are easy to use and maintain. For example, one tip I found helpful was to think about the flow of your home. Where do you naturally drop your keys when you walk in the door? Where do you tend to pile up mail? By recognizing those patterns, you can create designated spaces for those items and prevent clutter from accumulating in the first place.
That's brilliant. It's like anticipating your own messy habits and outsmarting them before they even happen. I'm all about preventative measures. But even with the best systems in place, things can still get out of control, right? Life happens, schedules get busy, and suddenly you find yourself drowning in clutter again.
You're absolutely right. And that's why the author emphasizes the importance of regularly evaluating and tweaking your systems. Just like we need to adjust our exercise routines or our budgets as our lives change, we need to do the same with our organizational systems.
So it's not a one and done kind of thing, it's an ongoing process. But what are some signs that it might be time for a system overhaul?
Well, the author suggests asking yourself a few key questions. Is this system still working for me? Has anything changed in my life that requires a tweak? Am I constantly fighting against my own system?
Those are great questions. It's a reminder that organization should make our lives easier, not more complicated. But I'm curious, does the audiobook delve into any specific techniques for maintaining a sense of order once you've achieved it? Like, how do you stay on top of things and prevent the clutter monster from creeping back in?
The author actually dedicates a whole section to maintenance tips. They talk about the power of creating micro-routines, small manageable tasks that you can incorporate into your daily life to prevent clutter from building up.
Micro routines, I like the sound of that. It feels much less daunting than trying to tackle everything at once. What are some examples of these magical micro routines?
Well, it could be as simple as taking 5 minutes each evening to tidy up your living room, or spending 10 minutes each Sunday to sort through your mail and paperwork. The author even suggests setting a timer to make it feel less overwhelming.
That's a great tip. I think a lot of us avoid organizing because we feel like it has to be this huge, time-consuming project. But breaking it down into smaller, more manageable tasks makes it so much more approachable.
Exactly. And the author also emphasizes the importance of celebrating your wins, no matter how small they may seem. Did you finally conquer that junk drawer? Give yourself a high five. Did you manage to stick to your micro routines for an entire week? Treat yourself to something special. It's all about recognizing your progress and staying motivated.
I love that. It's so easy to get caught up in what we haven't done yet, but it's equally important to acknowledge and appreciate the steps we have taken. But let's be honest, there are times when even the most dedicated organizers struggle. Does the author offer any advice for those moments when we feel overwhelmed or discouraged?
They absolutely do. They remind us that organization is a journey, not a destination. There'll be setbacks and challenges along the way, but the key is to be patient with yourself and keep coming back to your why. Why is organization important to you? What benefits do you hope to gain from creating a more ordered space?
That's such a powerful reminder. It's easy to get caught up in the aesthetics of organization, those perfectly styled, Instagram-worthy shelves. But ultimately, it's about creating a space that supports your well-being and helps you live a more fulfilling life.
Well said. And that brings us to the author's final point, which I think beautifully ties everything together. The importance of living with intention. Choose what you surround yourself with carefully. Let go of what no longer serves you. And create a space that reflects the life you want to live.
That's such a great takeaway. But before we wrap up, I have one final thought for you, something the audiobook doesn't explicitly address, but I think it's worth pondering. We've talked a lot about organizing our physical spaces, but what about our mental and emotional spaces? It's like you can have a perfectly tidy home, but if your mind is cluttered with anxieties and to-do lists, does it really matter?
That's such an important point. And it's something a lot of us struggle with, especially in today's fast-paced world. We're constantly bombarded with information and demands. And it can be hard to create a sense of peace and clarity in our minds.
Exactly. It's like even if I've decluttered my entire house, I can still feel overwhelmed by mental clutter. So how do we apply these principles of organization to our inner lives? Does the author touch on this at all?
While they don't explicitly address mental and emotional clutter, I think a lot of the same principles apply. It's about recognizing what no longer serves you, whether it's negative thoughts, limiting beliefs, or even relationships that drain your energy, and making a conscious effort to let those things go.
It's almost like we need to create a memory box for our minds, too. Choosing to hold on to the positive, uplifting experiences and letting go of the things that weigh us down. But that's easier said than done, right? Do you have any personal strategies for decluttering your mind?
One thing I found helpful is practicing mindfulness meditation. It helps me become more aware of my thoughts and emotions, and it allows me to observe them without judgment. That way, I can choose to focus on the thoughts that empower me and let go of the ones that don't.
That's a great tip. I've been trying to incorporate more mindfulness into my life too, and it's amazing how much of a difference it can make. Even just taking a few minutes each day to focus on my breath and quiet my mind helps me feel more centered and less reactive. But beyond meditation, are there any other practical tips you can share for managing mental clutter? I feel like my to-do list alone is enough to send me into a spiral sometimes.
Oh, I hear you on that. To-do lists can be overwhelming. One strategy I found helpful is to break down larger tasks into smaller, more manageable steps. That way, instead of feeling paralyzed by a huge project, I can focus on taking one small action at a time.
That's so true. I think a lot of us avoid tasks because we feel overwhelmed by the sheer scope of them. But breaking them down into bite-sized pieces makes them so much less intimidating. It's like instead of saying, I need to clean the entire house, you say, I'm going to spend 15 minutes decluttering the kitchen counter.
Exactly. And it's important to celebrate those small wins, too. Every time you check something off your list, acknowledge your progress and give yourself a little pat on the back.
Yes, I'm all about celebrating those small victories. It keeps you motivated and reminds you that you're making progress, even if it doesn't feel like it at the time. But what about those nagging thoughts that just won't go away? Those worries and anxieties that keep swirling around in your head?
That's where journaling can be a powerful tool. Sometimes just getting those thoughts out of your head and onto paper can help you release them and gain a fresh perspective.
That's a great idea. It's like you're giving those thoughts a designated space outside of your mind so they don't have to take up so much mental real estate. I also find that talking things out with a trusted friend or therapist can be really helpful. Sometimes just voicing those anxieties aloud can help you process them and move through them more effectively.
That's so important. Having a supportive network is crucial, both for managing mental clutter and for navigating life's transitions in general. And that brings us back to the main theme of the audiobook organization isn't just about creating a tidy home. It's about creating a life that feels aligned, intentional, and truly your own.
I love that. It's like once you start applying these principles of organization to all areas of your life, you start to see a ripple effect. Your home becomes a reflection of your values, your relationships become more fulfilling, and you feel more empowered to create the life you truly desire.
Well said. It's about creating space in your home, in your mind, and in your heart for the things that matter most, and remembering that it's an ongoing journey, not a destination.
So true. And on that inspiring note, we'll wrap things up for today. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the art of organization. We hope you've gleaned some valuable insights and practical tips that you can apply to your own life.
It's been a pleasure. And remember, no matter where you are on your organizational journey, be patient with yourself, celebrate your wins, and keep coming back to your why. Happy organizing, everyone.